Mistakes that we tend to do, try to get too many clients at the beginning. If you're not ashamed of your first product, you probably have launched too late. Last year, we're doing about $260 million revenue. Can you create value? Can you capture value? Can you keep that value? If you're only thinking about building products that's going to drive the company to $1 billion valuation, I would never be proud of raising so much money.
Another version for proof of concept based on customer or investors. Even the investor will bring it to you, or maybe the market from customer will bring it to you and start to improve it.
I get this person to become a mini CEO, right? Which means always to be humble enough to be wrong, to understand that you can be wrong and it's not a problem, and like change the product.
Idris, very nice meeting you today. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited to hear breaking news maybe. Since you were offline so much, we didn't hear a lot about your story. We didn't see a lot of videos, but hopefully today we can know more about your business model, especially with the Fetchr, and it was like amazing and inspiring for everyone.
No, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, happy to. It's good to see you. I think last time we were talking about, last time we connected was like 8 years ago or something?
And before that, first time I met you, you were like trying to pitch your idea for a couple of investors.
And we pivoted like 3 times, I think, after that. So, no, good story.
What a journey.
Yeah, it was a journey for sure.
And you were actually one of the first entrepreneurs in the ecosystem since the ecosystem 2011, 12 start to open up, Dubai especially. You were actually both. We were from the first entrepreneur, but you were in the beginning of the race. You know, you raised good fund. You were the first unicorn business. So let's start.
There was a wave slightly before with Ronaldo, right? The Ronaldo Mushawar and all the souk story. And I think, us and Karim were pretty much growing at the same time.
Absolutely.
And so it seems far.
Yeah, I consider like Ronnie and others before the ecosystem to kick off, you know?
True. Yeah, so then first wave,
Yeah. So today we will go more deep to talk about the business model of Fetchr, which was the logistics application. I remember it was from person to person, B2B, and then you pivoted to B2C, B2B. So today, let's start with how you came up with the idea.
So just before Fetchr, I was working actually at Marca VIP for a few months, and this is when I realized that 2 things. So one, that a lot of the consumers choose not to buy again because of logistics issue. We did this study about, like the one-time purchaser. So you typically spend anywhere between $20 and $40, right, on a cost per acquisition for e-commerce customer. Back in the days, I don't know now, but anyway. And then 70% of them who choose not to buy was because of logistics. So we realized that it was like you're investing in some kind of recipients where you have like holes everywhere, and the hole is called like logistics. And there is no point in investing so much into customer acquisition if you're gonna lose so many of these customers because of logistics. So this is where I realized that one, the problem was very acute, and it was by far the biggest problem of e-commerce from an e-commerce operation standpoint. And point number 2, I also realized that the tech was quite outdated. I don't want to, but if you look, there was just like DHL, FedEx, RMX, and their tech was quite good, but very centered on, especially for DHL and FedEx, right? For mature markets, right? Very good for the US, very good for the Western world. But for emerging markets, not really. And you only had RMX pretty much. And I think that every time in an industry where you are in a such dominant position, I think it's not great, right? Because it does not push you to innovate. It does not push you to get outside your comfort zone. So it has nothing to do with RMX in and of itself, but any players in that situation would be under-investing. That's called, the monopoly rent, right? That's why monopolies are so bad for the economy, right? For consumer especially. So I realized that I had no other options. For example, when I was at Marca, then go to them, and I realized that, okay, there has to be a better way to just deliver packages. So that's how we started. And it's funny because talking about business model, actually the business model at the very beginning was like creating a mix of souk and Fetchr, right? Which means that we actually wanted to attract the e-commerce players from abroad. Think about Corte Inglés, for example, in Spain, or Cdiscount in France, but also like some of this e-commerce in China and so on, and give them a platform that was both online with like content translation and everything, customization, and logistics. That was the first business model. I know it's crazy now thinking about it, but the first pitch was that. And then when we did this, we realized that the logistics was such a big component. Then we actually pivoted super early, right? We just killed all the e-commerce. I think he probably stayed for like 9 months, pretty much. Like we were doing a little bit of like website activities, translations, that kind of stuff. And then we realized that it was just not scalable in and of itself. So we migrated completely to building a better logistics experience and started investing into tech.
Interesting. So the idea starts from the Gap market, which you saw it with market VIP.
Yeah.
Then you somehow you try to do the e-commerce logistic. Then you found the logistic things. Then what was since you set up the logistic idea, what type of model you have started first?
So at the very beginning, we started with our first like few clients. Actually, I think that one of the mistakes that we tend to do a bit too early was try to get too many clients at the beginning in the early stage of your products. And I'm sure you're like, you know that and you face that. I see like a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to grow too fast when the product is not ready. At the beginning, you're never going to be judged on your cost per acquisition. Never. What matters is to build a product that is needed in the market. And for that, rather than staying in your ivory tower and thinking about what they want, what you think they want, there is nothing better than testing your product, right? Getting out there. And I always remember that sentence from Reid Hoffman, right? I love the guy and I love like his conception. He's just say like, if you're not ashamed of your first product, you probably have launched too late, which I love, right? Because technically the first time you go to market with your product, you have to feel ashamed. Because if you're not, it means that you've developed too much of a product that has not been tasted by the market, right?
Exactly.
So I think that this is super important. So what we did is that we had the first clients, like 4 or 5 clients, but tiny, like 10 packages a day, and then we started, obviously there was a lot
locally
of work.
or international?
No, local.
Local,
Yeah, because we were investing in.
So you were doing B2C?
B2B2C.
B2B2C.
Yeah, exactly. And then we obviously nothing was working. Airbnb was like nothing was working, literally. And then we were doing the deliveries. I remember back in the days with like Hassan and Omar, we were actually doing the deliveries ourselves because like we had one driver for the whole Emirates. I mean, it was a shit show.
Interesting.
But it was also interesting. But this is where you talk to the client. They tell you all the things that don't work. And then you start building products that they want, right? So yeah, that was the first part. And then the second part obviously was a bit of scaling operations. We start going into, like 1,000 packages a day, 800, that kind of stuff. But it was still very domestic. So we start getting into bigger accounts, the 100 packages a day type of thing. So slightly bigger clients already, not mom and pop, right? Like a real business. And this is where you start getting like, okay, now you have to have a strong backend. You're talking about APIs. You're talking about like all these odd scenarios. There is not only like the perfect scenarios, like all the different scenarios you need to be mapped out and developed. So that was like step 2. Step 3, we decided to integrate with cross-border shipments, and which was a whole other board game, I would say. But that was only like 3 years, I think, down the line, pretty much, that we started doing this.
So again, you started B2B2C, very small.
Yeah.
Then you start to increase the ticket of the accounts.
Yeah.
They became bigger. Then the third model where we started onboarding accounts from international
yeah,
and
exactly.
help them to deliver internally. As I remember, you were doing also business to person.
Oh yeah,
that happened.
Right.
Which period?
It did. It was fairly early. You're right. And so yeah, I think it was around like 2 years down the line that we started introducing C2C, where we could consumer to consumer shipments. It was always a debate at the C-level team whether we should kill it, because it was taking quite a bit of development as a bandwidth. We knew that there was a need, right? And the reason why, we knew that there was like a Uber rush back in the days. I don't know if you remember, Uber tried the consumer to consumer delivery. They tried that in New York and it didn't work. So a lot of these experiences were like tainted by none of them had worked, pretty much. But we thought that emerging market was very different. We thought that there was quite a high need here. So we had trouble giving it up. And so we kept on developing. That always represented anywhere between 2 and 10% of revenues. So nothing.
So people can sending to other people.
Yeah.
They were doing
consumer to consumer. But also very tiny businesses, right? Think about like influencers or they're selling 2 packages a day.
Families.
Families, yeah. Like I forgot my lunch at school. Like how you deal with this, right?
This service is available with Karim nowadays. Yes. You know about
it. Yeah. But, like he came,
but it's expensive.
But he came much later, no?
Absolutely,
yes. Come like 3, 4
I have
years
no
ago,
idea what type of business they are doing. What is the volume of the business? But
it's tiny.
It's important for emergency. Yes.
Yeah.
Like it happened with me when I didn't find anyone to help me to send the driver. Then it was only the solution, which was we spent 300 on something small, but it was urgently.
Whoa. That's expensive,
yeah.
But yeah, so like there was the typical scenarios of like, oh, you're at work and you forgot your charger.
Absolutely.
Okay. Somebody can get the charger.
It's cheaper than you go. 60 dirham. It's cheaper
60
than
dirhams,
you go.
Exactly. Or you're at the airport and you don't have your passport.
Absolutely.
That kind of stuff. Like, it always
happened a lot.
Exactly. So for like these kind of scenarios, but you know, it's not scalable, right? Like think about customer acquisition cost and life and LTV of the customer. You're never gonna recoup it with like 1 shot, 2 shots. So we never invested money in customer acquisition. It was only businesses that were using us from B2B. But at the end of the day, it's people, right? So these people that were using us say, hey, do we have a C2C? And it's like, okay, and they were using it. But we never put marketing money into that.
Have you did the business to business where the bulky logistics are involved between, let's say, wholesalers to distributor to wholesalers? Did you do this?
For sure, for sure. Yeah. But like the big e-commerce players, you need to have what we call first mile, right? Which is basically from their warehouse to our warehouse. So this is very different operations.
This mid-mile.
So look, I don't. The way I see it.
Absolutely, because you were like the head, the master of logistics. So you.
I don't know.
You're
master of logistics. I don't know. But like, first mile is technically from consumer to my first consolidation center.
Yeah.
Usually in domestic, the consolidation center is your distribution center.
Tamam.
Therefore, it's called first mile. If you're going from abroad, let's say China, the Guangzhou, you know, if you take the example of like some of the Chinese players, the Guangzhou to Hong Kong is first mile. Then the Hong Kong to Dubai is middle mile. And then Dubai to customer is last mile. In a domestic, the way we were coding it at Fetchr, maybe we did it all wrong the whole time, but we were coding it the first mile to consolidation center. And then any movements that goes between one distribution center to the other, think about it, you're delivering something from an e-commerce website that is based in Dubai and you go to Fujairah. Right? So most of the times you go to the warehouse in Fujairah, and the warehouse can be tiny, but that movement, warehouse to warehouse, we used to call that middle mile. Because basically, like we're in control. Basically, the sender and the receiver is both us.
Clear.
That's how we call like middle mile, at least at Fetchr.
Clear.
And then the last mile came on top.
Yeah. Till today, we get so much ventures or ideas to our venture builder firm where they wanted to do logistics, they wanted to copy Fetchr, they want to do C2C, B2C, B2B2C, B2B, so much, and even the market is really rich there.
Changed a lot.
Competition is really high,
super hard,
and I feel like we done everything for logistics. That's why already I have so much questions about your business model. So first of all, you had a lot, almost you had the 90, 70, 90, 80% of those logistic business model in your portfolio. So what makes you keep changing it from time to time?
Keep changing? I don't
Not
know.
focus on one and keep doing it.
No, it's funny because we felt, at least the way we feel is that we had all of them at the beginning, and that's usually what first-time entrepreneurs do. Like, me back in the days, is that you want to do too much, and then you realize what sticks, and then you start going narrow and narrow and a lot more deeper, right, on that segment. And I think that's pretty much what we did, right? Because at the very beginning, we had like B2B, we had like even platform customization, right? B2C, C2C, and it's only later that we narrowed it down, right? So, that's more how I see it. I don't see the only pivot that we did pivot, like literally, was our decisions to move away from small customers versus the big ones. And this one was a tough one, right? Because the consumer, like the very small businesses, they don't bring you a lot of volume, but they bring you quite a lot of margins, right? Once you have, obviously, your network, right? You need to have a couple of thousand packages already a day, which means that your average cost per order is already low. Obviously, if you cannot start only with small clients. But anyway, so even though that segment was probably the most profitable, it was just very low with regards to number of deliveries. So I remember that at the end, like the last 2 years, 3 years, was mostly enterprise. Like we knew that the traffic was being driven by the cross-border, we knew it, and we were building a solution for them. It worked in a way, right? My last year we were doing about $260 million revenues. So like it worked, it was big. But like it was a tough decision. I feel like this is the only big pivot that we did post revenues, right? Post large revenues.
Yeah, since because you were in let's say round A, round B, which stage you reached?
We did C, end of B, yeah. B.
So round B, where it's required from you to grow faster and faster. You look to the business different way than seed fund, and I think that
was all about scale.
Yeah, about scalability and how to reach the maximum, expand to other countries. Then what about the competition? Logistics. It's a high competition market. So how you handle that?
Yeah, to go back to your point, right? I think UAE is extremely competitive now as a logistics market. If I were to start again, I would probably not do it in the UAE, right? Like it's just, for a long time, I think that there was very few players and therefore very little innovation. And I feel like it's the opposite right now. Like you're saying, right? You're receiving so many people that want to like build a logistics business with the tech and so on. And I feel like this is almost overcrowded. And it's difficult because this kind of business requires you to have some kind of scale so that you reduce your marginal cost. It's very difficult for you to be able to get that volume for you to start innovating. And that's if you look at economy, right? This is the definition of hyper competition, right? There is obviously, competition which is good in and of itself, right? If you think about as much as capitalism is good, but like competition is good. But then there is a state of hyper competition, which is the hyper commoditization of what you're providing, right? A logistics service, which means it's a race to the bottom. You're always going to have people that are going to undercut you with regards to revenues. And if you do not manage to create enough savings by your technology, then nobody will invest. Because for example, in Dubai, if it's 9 dirhams anyway, then why should you invest? Unless it reduces your marginal cost. And if it does not, then don't invest. That's the logical decision to do. But then if nobody invests, then you start becoming backwards. And that was the problem. I was discussing with back in the days, it was like, I think the head of the Chamber of Commerce of Dubai, and they said that we had super interesting discussions about this, because he said that logistics businesses were the ones that were the most, that were failing a lot as a percentage, right? Which means that there was a lot of bankruptcy, and we don't like bankruptcy here, right? It creates unrest, especially back in the days when there were cash and delivery. So people had cash, it was like quite complicated. So that was one. And then two, he was wondering whether it was a race to the bottom. And I remember we had the discussion, and I'm like, you know what? It's possible. It's possible that we're going into the race to the bottom. Saudi was the complete opposite, right? 7 licenses on courier for like 30 years, 40 years, no innovation whatsoever, but not an 8th player. If you don't allow anyone to get into the market, then obviously there's not going to be, it's like an oligopolistic position, right? Nothing's going to move. They're just healthy, super high profits, and they just share the profits between companies. But then now it's completely opposite, right? Like when we got the license, I remember there was 2 licenses that day, and there was like a crazy event and so on. So it was a big thing. And I think like 2 years later, there was like 30 other companies. So now I think that even in Saudi, it's almost commoditized. And I think it's a problem for innovation, right? Because I understand it's a very tough balance, but like this is where you need to make sure that you don't over commoditize any of the markets, which is quite difficult from a regulator perspective.
I see. We'll come and talk about the future of logistics. End of the talk.
Cool.
It's important. But let me ask you this now. So much e-commerce coming, so much cross-border e-commerce are coming. So the number of shipments are increasing and scale really high those days. That will not allow logistics new ideas to come, competition, even if it's high, but still there is enough market for it?
Yeah, so look, I think if you, back in the days, right, e-commerce as a percentage of retail, that was extremely low. We're talking about 3% and so on, compared to like 25, 30, 40% in some countries. So extremely low. So we knew that e-commerce has at the long run, right? Because if you look at I would say the fundamentals of like UAE and Saudi, they're ripped for e-commerce. It's perfect, right? Because high purchasing power, sometimes, especially for tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities in Saudi, we're talking about having limited availability, right? Limited choices. It's not like you go on souk.com and then you see like these thousands of products. If you live in Abha, right, in Saudi, you're not sure you have access to all of these products. So it's not only about whether e-commerce is better than retail, is that sometimes it's the only option. So we knew that e-commerce would grow a lot. Now the question is that whether it reached like some kind of plateau. I think it did, right? And if you look at e-commerce there was like a McKinsey report that e-commerce grew like 20%. I think like CAGR for the past like 10 years, and they were thinking about growing. So they expect like a 13% CAGR for the next like few years till like 2025 or 2030 or something like that. I forgot exactly the date. So very healthy growth, higher than retail in and of itself, but still, so not booming, but still a healthy growth. And I think that's what's going to happen. You still have tons of verticals that are under catered. Tons.
I see. Then what is the matrix as an entrepreneur we should look at it to decide if we want to enter the logistic business or not?
So first, I think you need to be careful about really defining what's going to be your value proposition and how you think you're going to get better. Because there is always three things, right? Every time you think about a business idea, it's always three steps, right? I remember my class of like entrepreneurship is just like, can you create value? Can you capture value? Can you keep that value? 3 steps, right? Create value. Can you create a service where people are willing to pay for it? The whole issue versus paid versus not paid. There's tons of like ideas that are cool, but then if they start paying, boom, everybody's out. So that's creating value. Then capturing value is that how much of the market share can you actually capture? Because you might have like 5, 10 different players doing the same thing. Difficult to capture. And then 3 is how to keep it. Competitive pressure, barriers to entry, all that stuff. If you think about that framework, in logistics, I found it quite difficult to get past the first one. Think about it. How can you actually create value that is not in the market? Well, okay, you really have to think segment by segment, services by service. So for example, like one of the things I would do is like targeting very small niche.
Exactly.
Like for refrigerated deliveries of flowers. Nobody looks at flower costs, for example, like when you deliver flowers and it's like $14, like super high. Willingness to pay is much, much higher than on e-commerce. So like some very targeted segments. I also think that reverse logistics is super interesting. Nobody wants to do it. It's quite cumbersome. Like when you don't like something from Souk or Amazon and you need to reverse, it's a pain. In many e-commerce platform, it's a pain. And so like maybe targeting on this. There's a couple of companies in Europe that are purely targeting on this that are working pretty well. But man, if you think about the whole ecosystem, I think it's very difficult to go past stage 1.
So what I get from you now, if an entrepreneur wanted to do a logistic idea or a logistic business startup, so better to be focused on certain niche,
very targeted,
certain vendors or suppliers, certain market where small focus and start building up on top of it. But logistics, it's one of the businesses where they provide volume to make it profitable. So this is one of the challenges.
It depends on the competitive pressure, right? If your competitive pressure is high enough, then your switching cost is higher, right? If you have 2 players that are here only providing a service, your competitive pressure is not going to be big. If you have 10, 12, or 20, like in Dubai, very difficult, right, to create that value. So, yeah, you don't need. It's always. I think it's a slight mistake. So first, every successful venture does not mean VC successful ventures, right? So people have to stop thinking about, that the only path for a successful venture is to go VC routes and thinking like $1 billion valuation, right? I think it's a mistake, and it can only drive to failure. There is quite a lot of business. So yes, you're right. If you focus to a small part of the market, potentially not going to be $1 billion company, but you're going to be very profitable. Mm-hmm. And having a business where you have 50, 100 people that is very profitable, kudos. You're in control of your own company. You have not taken VC money. You're fully in control of your company. It's a great outcome, probably even better than the VC route sometimes.
Actually, the most common logistics ideas right now, it's all about fulfillment center to Amazon, to Noon, somehow for Instagram players, where they give them the full solution.
I think that's tough, don't you think?
It's very good for other businesses to just throw the headache of logistics storage.
True, but once you have one or two, isn't that difficult to differentiate yourself from others?
Well, this is something which we need to study it and do the product validation in the market and see how is it, because they are increasing now. I'm not sure about profitability yet. All the ventures I saw, they were like minus, looking for investment to grow. But also they provide a good, less hassle for vendors, especially the startups.
The need is there for sure. But now it's all about, think about step one, right? Can you create value? So you have to compare yourself to others. So I do not know if there is like 2, 3, 5, or 10 players that do this in the UAE. I would need to study more because things have changed and so on.
Clear. What you said that we need to stop looking for venture capitals because it's a mistake, which I agree with you 100%. Actually, when I grow up as an entrepreneur, always we were thinking about how to grow and get venture capital. And this is one of the disadvantage of an entrepreneur to think of it. They always, I want to highlight that now, that they always, we always look to Elon Musk and all this sharks there. But it's a wrong image to look into it. We need to look to what is happening around us and try to think big, but also step by step.
And I think that just, if you're only thinking about building products that's going to drive the company to $1 billion valuation, means you're going to forego a lot of opportunities that can change your life. Absolutely. And I think that's a big mistake, right? In and of itself. So I'm not saying one is better than the other, but there is definitely a lot more businesses that you can drive that can be a lot smaller than just this $1 billion business. And I think being obsessed by it is a mistake.
That's why we push all the ventures in our venture builder to be profitable as soon as 100%. Fast. Let's reach that point first. Then we look how we can expand the feature, the services, whatever.
Much better position, right?
Since we are talking about investment, you are one of those people who raise really good fund. As I knew from you that in total in your lifetime you raised plus $300 million. So let's talk about the logistics and Fetchr. How the first fund came, and especially you changed a lot of business model that didn't affect the investment or it boosted.
So first, I would never boast. I would never be proud of raising so much money, right? Because it means that the other way to look at it is that you built so many big businesses, though unprofitable. So there is something wrong about it, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Anyway, so we ended up raising, because three of my companies, including the current one, so we need we need some money to reach a stage where we become profitable. That amount has to be as little as possible. So I don't think we should boast about raising so much capital. But so now your second part of the question is that whether there is a change, a pivot that has been induced by investors that because of VC money. I wouldn't say so. I think it depends really on your relationship with the board and your investors. And I think if you're being driven by your board and by your investors, it's a mistake, right? I'm not saying they invest in you, right? They invest in you, in the business, in your vision, even though I hate this vision thing. But anyway, in your in your objectives, right? They believe that you can do it, right? And I think that's being changed to the point where you're completely buying the ideas of the board that you don't believe is a mistake, right? And I'm not saying you're always all the time right. I'm not saying you're all the time wrong, but you need to have discussions at the board. And if you believe it in some of this stuff, take it, change it, no problem. But like, I don't believe that you should be like 100% listening to what the board is telling you, because they're most of the time not experts in your field, and you're the one on the ground as well, making decisions and feeling the market a lot more than they do. So to answer shortly, no, never an investor drove me to do something I didn't want to do. Obviously, I listened. Obviously, I altered some of my decisions, but not massively, not directionally.
Clear. So in Fetchr, what was the how was the start? It was bootstrapping, or pre-seed fund?
I remember it was like 1 point something from like of my friends at BCG and a lot of other guys. It was crazy. Back in the days, there was nothing. I don't know if you remember. It was like so difficult. There was like 3 funds. Anyway, so yes, and then we raised 11 million, I think, in Series A, and then 40 million in Series B, 41. My experience was only, I don't pretend that it was the rule, but my experience raising money in this part of the world back then was very difficult. I almost gave up a few times, and it was just, the terms were just too tough, too deterrent for the entrepreneur. So yeah, I mean, this is where I left to the Valley to say, like, you know what, dead for dead. Let's try one last time, and let's try to go to the Valley and try to raise money, which was never done pretty much back then, right? Now completely different, right? But back then it was not really. So I went to San Francisco and then went to pitch competitions, started meeting people, and then things pan out for the good. But yeah, it was very, very difficult. For me, like, fundraise is is a necessary pain, almost. Like, I don't love to do it, but it's just like, you need to be so damn good at it in this environment if you want to survive.
If you want to build something big,
Yeah, if you want to build something big.
Because those entrepreneurs are always looking to build something big and make people benefit from it. And then you need to somehow to pay the bill, which is for sure. 20 hours of working, high stress, risk fund.
Yeah, the stress is a big one. But yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, but I just feel like this is so. When I hear some of this pitch, right, some of them really puts me like uneasy, right? Because it's just like, oh no, like it's just such a no. Like, don't present it that way, or. But yeah, no, like fundraising is definitely, I think it's the most important traits for a CEO. A CEO is here first to keep the lights on. CEO is here to raise money and to assemble a team. That's the first two. Then if you want to go bigger, it's to reach objectives. That's it. These are the 3 objectives of the CEO. That's it. Nothing more in and of itself.
Then Fetchr was attracting money because of the number of transactions, or because of the unique idea itself, or maybe because it has potential expansion in different countries. So what was the key of attraction?
I think if you think about VC, it's all about how they're trying to de-risk their investment. So they need to be confident that what you did before can be replicated and scaled after the investment. And at the end of the day, they think about investments as how this investment could be doing like 10x at least, how they invest. So they need to be convinced that, 1, that this is a great idea and that you're creating value. 2, that you can scale, you as a person, as a CEO, the team, and so on. And then 3, that they can exit, right? Because we keep on talking about building great businesses, but VCs need to exit their investments, right? You have a lifetime. One of the things that I really understood, is just like, there is at one point, like, irrespective as to whether the company is doing well, they're going to need to exit. Might put the company in pressure. You need to be aware of it. That's all. Nothing bad, nothing good. You just need to be aware of it.
What about you jumped from a business model to a business model, and then I want to be sure, and I understand what makes you always come up with the new business model, because you look to the numbers, you look to the need, and you keep swatching. You had enough money to do that. Even with the venture capital, they push you to do some business model. I'm not sure, but I want to ask about the product validation. Each time you come up with a new business model, what makes you verify this business model and say, okay, let me continue with this or not?
It's a good question. The way we typically make decisions, I don't pretend that this is the rule, but at least this is how I operate, is that I feel like there is always a small percentage of budget, think about 5%, this order of magnitude, that you can use for innovation. And when I say innovation, it's a big word to say, try small business models, small segments that you think has some potential. So we always did that. And I always do this because I prefer to see how that experience works, unit economics, customer adoption, the early signs of it. But I always want to have this before building a case. The opposite way of doing it is presenting to the board, saying, "Hey, we believe that we have a big market, let's say in cold transportation, right? We believe this is McKinsey's report, blah, blah, blah. We believe that is not a lot of players. Therefore, we believe we should do it, and we're going to allocate 10% to this," right? Very deductive. While I prefer to do it the other way. We do this pretty much as a brainstorm, within the C-level team. And if we have enough conviction within the C-level team to try, because we can all be wrong, right? And we are more wrong than right? Then we test. We're just you know what? Just test it. And we have scrappy teams, scrappy tech, everything breaks, not made for scale, but it's made for try, okay? Which is a little bit like the 3M, right? So I don't know if you read the case study, very similar to the 3M, always trying to disrupt from the interior. So I think so that's how we do it. And only when we have the first signs, either we kill it, or we just go to the board. It's you know what? We tried this, we believe it's good, we believe that now we could be 15% of my revenues next year, right? So I prefer to do this way rather than being completely deductive. So that's how we pivot or at least assign resources between projects.
And then this will lead us to proof of concept. It's the biggest subject in our venture builder, because you need to proof of concept in every stage.
Exactly.
So what is the proof of concept for you, and how it was changing from model to a model?
But we're not changing the model. We're just trying to see whether there is an additional revenue streams. But every time you add the revenue streams, you go back to POC, right? It's not because we're big now, we do, I don't know, $100 million revenues, then you're still not doing a POC, right? You're still doing a POC for some of the stuff, right? So some of the products that you're launching. So always follow the same structure as if it was your first revenues. So don't start too early, don't start too late, don't think about scaling too early. Don't do the same mistakes at the product level than companies do at the company level, right? So don't spend money into acquisition. Always when you start a new project, because you always recruit somebody for that. He has a very tiny team. You give him 4 techies. He's building a project, 1 project manager, 6 people, 1 pizza, right? And then that's it. They start working, and a lot of them, they want to scale. They want to scale too fast, right? They're super hungry. They want to prove that they were right, in their assumptions, and you keep on holding them down. Get the products better, get a further validations of POC, trying to get some of these customers to pay. Just get into a little bit later of the adoption, right, cycle, and then you can launch it, right? But not too early. So yeah, POCs. You need to. Every time you launch a new service or new products, you need to go back to POC.
I see. But correct me if I'm wrong about the proof of concept. Usually what we tell our entrepreneurs, especially when they have an idea, that the proof of concept is something which you need to identify it yourself in the beginning. So you put some metrics, let's say number of customers, let's say 10, income, let's say $20,000, the product certain level, and you start to hit that. Sure. Those metrics, then you start to do another version for proof of concept. Sure. Based on customer or investors. Yep. And see what they are need. But another matrix, even the investor will bring it to you, or maybe the market from customer will bring it to you, and start to improve. 100%. This is the right way?
Yeah, this is the right way. For me, like looking back at it, I feel like it's quite difficult to put like hard metrics, but it's more like a mindset. But putting metrics does make sense. So maybe I did it wrong, but like we never say like, oh, we need to get 15 customers, because it doesn't really mean anything, right? Your first customer is gonna give you feedback on your product. Oh, your product sucks, or by the way, or you need to. No, it's not what we want. We would prefer you to do this, right? So why you want to go to 10 if the first 3 are telling you the same thing, right? So there's always like, I'm always worried about like this putting like hard deadline, because then they're gonna want to reach the deadline no matter what, and it makes no sense sometimes, and especially when you start putting targets as revenues. Difficult, right? But like for example, so for me it's all about having. So when I launch this, I get this person to become a mini CEO, right? Which means always to be humble enough to be wrong, to understand that you can be wrong and it's not a problem, and to like change the product. Like I think it's a lot more efficient than giving them, okay, get a POC, you got $200,000, whatever that amount is, you use that as a budget, and then good luck, right? Because if it's not working, I don't want him to spend $200,000, him or her, right? So ideas get killed after 2 weeks sometimes.
Absolutely.
And there is no shame.
Then one of the key successful proof of concept, it has to be flexible to change from time to time.
100%.
Even if you put it there, you are targeting them, but then in the way you find out that.
But that's product life cycle, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have this humble, right? If you're not humble enough for you to understand that you're going to be wrong most of the time, like this is bad, you shouldn't be hired.
Interesting.
Should be hired for scale, maybe very different people, right? But to test and try, no.
Then tell me now, if somebody came to you, and this is a really important subject for us, at least, and the venture builder is really important because so much ideas for logistics. So what is the future of logistics, do you think? Especially you are someone who looked at Silicon Valley and US. I looked at that and see really interesting ideas. As you say, they focus on certain type of customers or category. So, but what is the future for you, do you think?
So I'm trying to find a framework, right? So I think there is the framework of emerging market versus mature markets. There's the framework of like B2B versus B2C. I'm trying to see my first reaction would be like that I do not see logistics going into, except these small businesses, these small verticals that can be very profitable, and you sell it for 20 million and then you're good, like, so except this at ground, at 20,000 feet view, except anything that has to do with automation, I don't know. I don't think if anything's gonna revolutionize it. I would say no.
With AI is not going to help by, let's say, identifying as a warehouse, just an example, AI might help you to somehow recognizing the empty space, storage in a better, efficient way.
Sure, but it's marginal, man.
Yeah.
It's marginal. Like how much percentage? Like you should not so first you should not, I'm not saying you do, but you should not think that AI is the same as statistics, right? Statistics can actually get you quite far without artificial intelligence, right? So that's one. And not using statistics is stupid, okay, in and of itself. So that's one. And then the incremental value that you move from a heavy statistical like backgrounds, like now how you run your business or analytical backgrounds, to AI, it's super incremental. So I don't see that. So like obviously you could always improve your operations, but your saving is gonna be very little.
Absolutely. So, I have been looking for a lot of ideas, especially in Saudi logistic idea for automation.
Yeah.
The problem is not about the idea itself. The problem, the whole ecosystem of the logistics, they are not helping to automate things.
100%.
So much parties coming in the way.
And you always have to think about, like when you think about like automation, is that what's the cheapest alternative cost, right? Which is people. And we are in an economy where the cost of labor, especially for blue collar labor, is low. And that does not drive innovation. Why would you like think about a pizza that can be done either by a robot or by a person, right? How many hundreds of thousands of pizza you need to actually recoup your investments, especially when the incremental cost of that robot versus a person? if you were paying that person $50 an hour, aka like in Japan and so on, like obviously you have a much stronger incentive to innovate. So having blue collar workforce at very cheap rates is good in some aspects. That's why if you think about all the food delivery, I don't know if you've seen their global reports, you know, there is always Kuwait, UAE, because you have super high purchasing power. So the basket size is super high. The cost of the rider is super low, and the repeat is super high. So
it's a small city as well, comparing to Riyadh, just an
exactly.
example.
So perfect storm, right? But the problem is that then what's going to be the incentive of a city like Dubai to actually make, you know, like everything automated, right? Automated riders and that kind of stuff. Like I think it's far. And I know Dubai is trying to do this, right? So but they're trying to do this for non-economical reasons. They're trying to do this because Dubai want to be at the forefront of innovation, and that's great. But purely from an economic perspective, does it make sense? It doesn't. It does not. It does not.
Clear.
But it's just.
Then what about those who try to add a freelancer or third party to the delivery, where you don't own your fleet, you just use the freelancers, or let's say Ubering the deliveries.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this model?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind, right, is just that the Uberization of the workforce seemed to be like a long time ago, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, seemed to be the solutions for everything, and it's not that clear, right? So obviously there is some stuff that do make sense, right? The Uberization of assets, you know, be it Uber, be it Airbnb, like that does make a lot of sense. Now, if you think about riders, so first you start having regulations that really push back on this. And I'm not talking only about Spain. So I was at Glovo, so I don't know if you saw what happened with Glovo. There was an article like last week or 2 weeks ago where Delivery Hero had to factor potentially up to 400 million euros because of the way Glovo, we actually use riders. Because it's one thing to think that you're riders, but if you have enough power over the riders, that is basically a relationship of employee versus employer. If you have all these indices, right, the flux of like this nexus that actually makes him a quasi-employee, the Supreme Court will decide, okay, look, if it smells like an employee, if it looks like an employee, it is an employee. You're just trying to avoid taxes. So I'm trying to make it simple, right? Yeah. But like obviously it's a lot more complicated, but like there's like 15 different reasons why they decided such, but same problem in Italy, we're getting the same problem in France. So, and it's not even just Europe. Like Uber lost it in California, right? So with regards to actually considering riders of Uber as temporary workers. So first, you have a big push on regulations, and I think it's just a matter of time since it's gonna happen. And it makes sense, I'm sorry, but if you make 80% as a person, as a rider, if you make 80% of your revenues through one platform, you're pretty much an employee, right? So anyway, so that's point number one. Point number two is that at the end of the day, you need to pay for that resource. So unless you're completely okay by having people that are just gonna make like so little money as a model, because what's the Uberization of riders? You're just gonna, you know, the lower cost possible, right? Unless you're okay with this, which is difficult from, I would say, from an ethical standpoint, you need to have like some kind of minimum wage, right? We kind of agree that it has to be some kind of minimum for these people to live like a decent life. How you want to spread that across? Somebody has to pay. Somebody has to pay for this. And I think that the Uberizations of riders is now reaching some of these limits, right? It's not necessarily better. It's not necessarily cheaper. And the government or the Supreme Court is telling you that whatever you want it to look like, it's not necessarily what it looks like.
Okay. Then what about drone logistic model?
Yeah, drone works really well, I think. So, I mean, really well. Tons of issues with drones. So but I think drones going to be always an odd case scenario, right? I mean, like rescue, that kind of stuff. You know, I need medication. I'm in the middle of the desert. That makes sense. I'm in a remote locations, that makes sense. I need to deliver something to somebody that is lost in the mountain, that makes sense. But having Amazon packages delivered through drone, I think people completely underestimate the visual pollution, the sound pollution, and all the practical aspects of getting deliveries. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And privacy, think about drones always going back and forth on your, like you have no privacy. People are a lot more attached to their privacy now, and they're right to stay private. So I think it's a great idea conceptually, but it's never going to be the mass solution. I think like for me on delivery, like the AVGs, you know, the automated guided vehicles, you know, the ones actually, you know, that are on the floor and stuff, probably bigger success. There is a couple of companies that are doing this. We tried at Glovo, we tried that actually in Spain. We found that some of the people were actually hijacking the robot and breaking the robot to get the food.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see that coming pretty much, but anyway, it did happen more than what we thought it would. So I think we're quite a long way until it becomes a mass solution.
Very interesting.
And not only for technological standpoint.
Yeah. So we spoke enough about Fetchr and the logistics business model. I just want to catch up with you about your new business model, which is the Fintech model. Flow 24?
Flow 48.
48. Why it's 48?
Because we actually want to be able to give an options to get funded in 48 hours. But we actually now managed to do it in 48 minutes. So we changed slightly. But anyway, it's just like our ability to be able to compute the information for us to give a credit score.
And what makes you come to this business model?
I would say two things. I would say one, there is obviously, we all understand that SMEs in emerging markets are under-catered, right? They represent 60% of GDP, 80% of jobs. The central bank says that this is the lungs of the economy, right? This is the engine of the economy. Not only here, right? All emerging markets, including in Saudi, you see like Vision 2030, like big time about employment and so on. So you have that on, like everybody understands that SMEs are the core of this. And then on the other hand, you realize that banks don't lend to SMEs. And it's always shocking. So like SME loans represent like less than 10% of loans of banks in most of the markets, while they represent 80% of the economy. There is something fundamentally wrong. If you think about, you know, like the theory of economic theory, like 18th, 19th century, and why banks were created. They were created to inject money into the economy, right? They're here to be this in-between, you know, between the central bank or like all the savings and then being able to inject into the economy so that it rotates, you recycle the money, and then you create jobs and wealth. There is something broken here. If they're only giving like less than 10% of whatever, you know, they're getting inside as assets to SMEs, there is a big issue. So that's the problem. So that's one. And then two, and it's always something that drives me, is the level of unfairness. It's unfair, right? If you have two businesses that are exactly similar, okay? Exactly, same financial performance. One is in the US, it's gonna be funded in 2 weeks at best, at 8% interest rate, okay? And you have 99% chance to get funded, like a good business. The exact same business. In the UAE or in Saudi, you have about 5% of chance to get funded, and you're gonna be funded at about 25%. There is something fundamentally wrong. It's the same company, right? So what we're trying to, the reason why I think it exists is because it's not because you have not a lot of debt providers that wants to be able to get access to private debt, right? There is a lot of private debts, you know, all around the market. So it's already there. But the problem is that they do not know how to invest in some of these markets because there is this huge information asymmetry. While a fund that is like $1 billion under management, even though if they want to invest in places where you can have a yield of like 16, 17, 18%, which they cannot get in the US, the only reason why they're not investing there is because they don't know the markets, huge information asymmetry. And two, there is no channels to channel tons of, like billions of dollars directly to the SMEs. And that's exactly the two things we want to do, right? One, we want to get rid of the information asymmetry, basically triangulating information from multiple places for us to get some kind of credit score from that SME so that people now know how credit worthy it is, and obviously building around this. And then two, actually build the conduits, build that channel. So we're starting with our own funds, and then at the end of the day, we want to be able to get to like much larger investors so that they could invest, co-invest with us in some of these SMEs. And we believe that's the only way. as the only way to channel billions and billions of dollars and creating millions of jobs. That's the vision.
Risk management here is really heavy in your business model. How, and especially when you give loans to SMEs, which difficult to get loans from banks because of the risk management. So, and that increase the risk in your business model. But how you deal with that?
That's exactly. I mean, I think the risk can be managed. It is risky, but it does not mean cannot be done, right? So, multiple things. One, you need to be able to triangulate a lot of information from a lot of different places, right? And for that reason, I believe that banks are, like, in that sense, are not like really guilty for it, because the infrastructure was not built, was only built like very lately, right? In the past couple of years. If you think about open banking platforms, for example, like Lean and so on, they've been built like in the past, 5 years, if that, right? With still very like nascent technology. So I would say the building blocks that you need for you to be able to underwrite a business were not even existent. Now they exist, that they're existent, okay? It's all about gathering all that information, building your risk engine in and of itself, and then spitting out a number, right? Spitting out a risk assessment of that company. So that's what we're doing. There is nothing like this in the market, because for all the reasons that I mentioned, that you needed to have like all these building blocks that were now here. And then being able to lend to SMEs, which is a whole other issue, right? Being able to raise debt that is eager to fund SMEs, especially through a platforms that we're young, right? We're only 2 years old, right? So we have limited data sets. Obviously, it's changing every day, but like, it's a challenge. It's been a challenge. But risk can be managed. And I think like you now have the tech tools to be able to do it. And then it becomes only about how you manage the risk.
Clear. And here the competition with the fintech is really, I feel it's still low competition, even if you see a lot of players, but still the market is still new, big, easy, even comparing to e-commerce. So the competition here is still have space for everyone.
I would say so. I would say it's a typical like blue ocean type of scenarios where you have, I believe like the trade finance gap for SMEs in the UAE is like 120 billion per year. Massive businesses. So now it's all going to be taken by either banks to some extent or fintechs.
But at the same time, the fintech required, the margin is really, really low, even if there is no high operation, but still the margin is low comparing to traditional business, where it's lead that you need to big data or big users, big transactions.
Depends. So if you think at the unit economic level, I would say that the gap between what you are being financed and that you're financing can be quite healthy. It's not bad at all. And then two, it all depends. I think your point is that as a business model, whether it makes sense, it all depends about for me at least, it depends about your CAC, right? Your cost of acquisition. And I think that if you're smart enough, you can get a CAC that is really in check and making sure that you can grow pretty cheaply. So yeah, I think it's doable.
Clear. And where do you think that can go in the future as a business model?
It's huge, man. I think it can be huge. I think like at the end of the day, think about us being financing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of SMEs, right, per year. I would say it's like super exciting, right? So it can go. So first, it can go quite big, it can go quite deep into the market. Then there is obviously country expansion, right? We just started South Africa as a country like three months ago, working super well. And there is a lot of other countries that are interesting. And then there is more products as well. Once you have the SMEs, for revenue-based finance or invoice-based financing, then you can add like cross-border payments. You can add a lot of things that SMEs need. So you can expand quite a lot. Let's see.
Idriss,
let's see what sticks.
Absolutely. Idriss, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure I have more than 20 people. I need to share the link with them who wanted to start logistics or already did. They always having this ambition ideas. So better to give them some advices to help them identify the right business model. Thank you so much for your information.
Thanks a lot. Take care.